What's going on, you guys? So this guy has made recent headlines. Um, yeah, we're just gonna hop right into it. His name is Joel Webbon, I believe. My friend right here at the far left corner, Joel Webbon. This guy, he is in the crosshairs for his most recent comment was not on this panel, but rather it was on a uh, episode that he was shooting where he talked about basically how the black church is very heretical. And I was like, but the comment that really messed me up wasn't so much that the black churches is heretical. Honestly, I've been in enough black churches to know that what he's saying is partially true. It is like there's a lot of, there's a lot of churches, especially predominantly black churches, that do speak out of an emotionalism more than they do out of a biblical standpoint. And when I say emotionalism, I literally mean like they preach a gospel that is so black centered, black power movement that it dang near is like, bro, we're not even talking about God at this point. We're talking about basically making ourselves gods. And so therefore I understood what he meant when he said that. But the comment that really got him in trouble was more so the fact that he said that black churches need white men to teach them the Bible. Now that I was like, no, absolutely not. I'm like, bro, this is why certain people think that Christianity is a white man's religion. This is dang near exactly why people think that Christianity is a white man's religion because of comments like that. Because he's trying to play like this white savior role. He really is. That's what it sounds like to me. I couldn't really find the video. I was having the hardest time finding the video for whatever reason. But either which way, that's what was said. Now, what we're watching here, we have God, Logic, and Ruslan, and this is Joel's panel of his buddies over at NXR Studios. They're having a debate on interracial marriage. Now, if you don't know who Ruslan is, he has a huge channel. Same thing, evangelical, apologetic YouTube podcaster, all that stuff. But he's married to a black woman. Now, obviously, for someone like these three, which is funny because my man here in the middle is biracial, and yet he's even on the side of, no interracial marriage, which is very interesting to me. Like, why would you be against interracial marriage when interracial marriage literally brought you into existence? Either way, it's a very confusing thing. So here we are right now is a point in time that I felt was very essential for us to witness, and so therefore that's what I want to watch with you guys. They're asking, Ruslan's asking Joel the question about basically like if a black man who was a Christian, he loved Jesus, went to your church, wanted to marry your daughter 10 some whatever years from now, right? Like, would you? And his response is very interesting.
Black brother, maybe your half brother pulls up, loves Jesus, loves the Lord, loves your local church. I don't know, how old are your daughters? I don't want to make it weird.
They're very young.
Okay, so let's just say fast forward 10 years down the road. You got a cousin that loves Jesus. Man, he loves the Lord. He's a post-mill Christian nationalist, theophanist, natural law, all those things.
Doesn't like Israel.
Right? Doesn't like Israel. He hates the Jews.
Checking all the boxes.
All the things. And your cousin and your brother, your half brother, he's full black. He shows up 10 years, 15 years where he starts dating your daughter. Are you now saying, hey, I don't think you guys should get married? And they love each other and they love the Lord and have culture in common and they're very similar. Are you now, like, did your position change in that regard? Because you said if your wife, your daughter brings home a black man, you're like, praise the Lord, he loves Jesus. Awesome.
Right. Great question. So this is how we respond. First, just to make it just clear for our audience, that would never happen. And the reason that would never happen is no young man will date any of my daughters without first coming through me. We don't do dating in the Webbon household. So it would be courtship.
Say
they would have
go
to
do
talk
first.
to me
Yes, yes,
first.
yes, yes.
So it's not like, oh, I'd find out 6 months in,
That's
oh,
not-
my
that's-
daughter's dating someone and I didn't even know. So we're not libs. So we don't do that. So that would never happen. Number two, this is my wife and I were talking about this, because I've had to disciple my wife and, like for her to know, okay, what are some of these developments? Can you walk me through it? Because these are new things. This is not what we were taught. Like a couple of years ago, when you hear me espousing those things, you play those clips, you know who I'm thinking of in my mind as I'm saying that? Who I still respect greatly, but who I'm thinking of Vodi Bakum. I love Vodi Bakum. Mm-hmm. Right, I was honored to have one public conversation with him, an episode on Christian nationalism, and one private phone call. And I'm not gonna talk about the private phone call because we have enough people saying, "Well, Charlie Kirk texted me private," or I had a private phone call. I'm sick of that crap with all the stuff online right now. You know how many people are saying like, "Oh, well, he personally told me this right before he died." So no, I had one private phone call. It was great, and we did not talk about interracial marriage. So I'm not gonna talk about that. But here's the deal. I'm thinking of Vodi Bakum. I'm thinking of him saying one race, the human race, and a few years ago, I would have been like, yeah, one race, the human race. You get them, Vodi, get those racists. And that would have been my position. And I've developed since then. So in this scenario, if a young black man came to me first, because we do courting, he'd have to go through me, and he wants to date my daughter, I'm always going to consider her interest. If she's not interested, we're not doing it. So I'm going to talk to her. I would consider those interests, those kinds of things. But in terms of would I give the green light, as I was walking my wife through this, and she brought up the same kind of question, and she said, Vodi, that's who she used in this analogy. She was like, what if it was, one of Vodi's sons? And then it's one of our daughters. And I said, see, and this is important for the debate, the distinction between two different categories, ethnicity and race. And I believe they overlap, but we're going to use them as two different terms. Ethnicity, I would say, it contains the racial components, but it's much broader. Because ethnicity is not just biological, it's not just ancestry and lineage, but it also encompasses language, liturgy. So I do L's, like loves, language, liturgy, being worship, religion, those kinds of things, customs, culture, traditions, all these things come in, law, all these things come into play with ethnicity. And in the case of Vodi Bakum's son, it would be, and this is just the reality, I'm not excited about it, it makes me sad, but it is the reality. Vodi Bakum's son, in these United States of America, in the year of our Lord 2026, would be one of the rare black men, young black men, who actually shares, for the most part, virtually to a T, the same ethnicity as my white daughters, right? Meaning same religion, same worldview, same traditions, both celebrate Thanksgiving, both, like Christmas, same, all that traditions, customs, heritage, being like, he's not a black Nigerian who came here 15 minutes ago, but like has been in America, heritage black American that has been here, tracing his ancestry back for a couple centuries. So in that regard, and they're Reformed Baptist, I'm Reformed Baptist, the doctrinal things would be aligned, all those kind of things. So that would be one of the rare individuals. The reality is, and I don't think you guys are going to push back on this, the reality is, I would say that about 90 to 95% of the black church in America is heretical, has terrible doctrinal views.
Hold on.
So what you're
are you
posing,
conceding that you would let your daughter marry Vodi Bakum's son 10 years in the future? Is that what you're saying?
what I'm saying is that would be permissible.
Okay.
I would not encourage it, though.
You would not encourage
Would
it?
you discourage it?
Yeah.
It depends.
On what?
Well, because, so here's the scenario. For every young black man that meets that mold, the ethnic, not racial, but ethnic mold, they have the same religion, the same traditions, the same customs, the same language, all that kind of stuff. For every one of those, currently right now, in not just America, but in my local church, there would be several young white men who would also meet those exact standards.
So basically, he would kind of go through like the whole DEI kind of regiment where it's like, look, for every 20 white people, there's this one black guy. Except it would be like dang near the reverse opposite of what DEI was meant to do. It would work more in his favor in the sense of if I have a white daughter, which in the case he does, and she's of age to court in his case, right? She just so happens to find a young black man who corresponds with my beliefs, corresponds with our. I think he's using, and they kind of clear this up. I've watched majority of this already. He uses ethnicity, the word ethnicity, in a different way. I actually ended up like, let me just look up the definition. So we understand that the definition of ethnicity is a shared cultural identity based on ancestry, language, traditions, religion, and history, allowing groups to distinguish themselves from others. So let's know that ethnicity is not the same as race, right? Actually, in fact, it says right here, race is often based on perceived physical characteristics, whereas ethnicity is based on shared culture and heritage. An individual can have a specific race, but identify with a different, more specific ethnicity, black race, Nigerian ethnicity, right? So just so we're clear, what he's using is pardon me, kind of in a way like I'll say it like this. Basically, he's basically saying that ethnicity for him would basically be a commonality that we would have beyond skin tone, but as it pertains to to his example, right? He celebrates Thanksgiving, he celebrates Christmas, he loves, let's say he loves America, so on and so forth, right? And so I was like, okay, well, I get it, but it's a cover up, is what I see. Is a very much a cover up, in the sense that you would not be willing to allow your daughter to date a black man because, and he makes this point a little later on. In fact, Ruslan called it early in his opening statement that you basically just want to have grandkids that look like you, right? And they go on, and this might end up, I think this is going to end up probably being a little bit of a longer video than I usually do because there's a lot to dissect here. There's so much to dissect here. Especially as a fellow believer in Christ. And I believe that he believes in Jesus, but I also believe that people like Joel, they tend to allow their emotions and their preferences to misguide them in understanding biblical matters, and also the differentiation of biblical matters to preference, right? Because the reality is he's living in a preference. In his opening statement, he clearly talks about how he, again, because we're talking about interracial marriage, how basically that there's no, he claims, his own words, that there is no basis for interracial marriage being sinful, right? There's no basis of interracial marriage leading to patterns of sin. And he says a couple other things in his opens. It was a long opening statement. I was like, good God. And so I'm like, okay, to that regard, it's you're just sitting here telling us your preference then, dude. You're just sitting here telling us hey, look, if I could have it my way at BK, it would literally be that I would want my daughters to marry white men. I would respect that more than, you basically just trying to utilize the Bible as a weapon to say that God, in his original design, because this is basically his argument, that God's original design was for us not to mix with other races, but rather that each race should stay within its own race. Now, as Americans, we understand that America is a melting pot. We have so many different religions, so many different ethnicities, so many different creeds here within the states. But obviously outside the states, aside from the United Kingdom, but if you go to places like Africa, Nigeria, if you go to China, if you go to Japan, all those places, they all look the same. They all share basically the same commonality in the fact that they all look at the same. And so that's kind of what he's trying to get at, is the fact that America should look like the ones who found it. But then I would have to argue at that point that, well, in that case, America should really look like the Native Americans because they were the ones who were here originally before we ever came. They were here. So with that being what it is, it's like we can't now. Obviously, the white settlers came in from across from Europe and came to America and began to subjugate the land. And so to his point later on, he talks about kind of like, how I think it's really based in this. It's based in fear. It's rooted in a fear that the white man is going extinct. That's really where he's at. He's based in the idea that he's afraid that the white man is going to go extinct, right? And it's like, dude, if that's the case, first of all, the white man will never go extinct. Want to know why? Because you still got places like Russia who are basically dang near 97% white, right? You still got places like Scotland and Ireland who are still predominantly white, Germany predominantly white, like these places, like if it's in a problem within America, white America, then okay. But if you're talking about worldwide, white people aren't going anywhere. They're not, and I mean, thank God. I love white people. I love my people, to the point that was made earlier about Bodhi Bakum basically talking about there's only one race and that's the human race. I co-sign that 100%. If you guys been watching, if you haven't watched, there's a video me and my wife made together called The Idol Called Black. I would highly recommend checking that out. We made that shortly after Charlie Kirk was murdered, and the black church is saying all this, that, and the third. But I don't co-sign with being pro-black. I co-sign with being pro-Jesus the whole way, because at the end of the day, this is just how I identify on Earth, right? This is just what it is. But as far as my identity should be rooted in Christ, and that's where I feel like the problem comes for Joel, is that his identity is too far rooted in his skin color. It's too far rooted. So the same thing that I would say to black people about you need to get away from looking at the natural. You need to get away from looking at your skin color, right? And begin to look outward. I mean, not inward, outward, and say, God, renew my mind, change my mind, give me my identity, even restore back to me my identity in you, right? It changes your entire perspective. And so therefore it's like problem with people like him, same thing with black people, same with anybody. If you're Asian, if you're Japanese, if you're Arabic, I don't care, right? This is for anybody. When your identity is rooted in your race, you will become very, very emotional, very, very hostile towards anybody that comes against. I'm like, bro, people can say, oh, black people are just like, I'm like, bro, whatever. I don't care. I don't co-sign. Like, do I acknowledge my blackness? 100%. Am I like just waking up blind? No, absolutely not. But my blackness doesn't determine anything for me. Okay, it's not determining whether I get a job. It's not determining whether I don't get a job. It's not determining what kind of clients I'm going to take. Even though majority of my clientele is black, I didn't choose that. They just chose me that way. But like, yeah, it's just, this is the problem. This is an identity issue, and unless he's able to see beyond this, he's going to be in a very rude awakening, and he's just never going to be satisfied in life. That's the biggest thing. So I'm sorry for the super long rant. I appreciate you guys sticking with me, but yeah, I just wanted to add that in here before he answers this very simple question.
That's not what we're asking. Would you discourage the black man who meets those standards? Would you discourage your daughter or that relationship?
What I'm saying is that if all things are equal, black man, white man, with my daughter being white, if all things are equal, I would encourage her towards a white young man.
Would you discourage her from the black man?
It's a simple yes
Yeah,
or no.
yeah.
So you would discourage her.
Yeah, as opposed to marrying.
Sorry, God Logic's face killed me. Got you. Like now, like because now we know. Like, bro, it's just it's rooted in prejudice. Your entire thing is rooted in prejudice. You can sit here and you can try to analytical this and 20 white men to one black guy and this, that, and the other. No, dude. It's consistent across the board. The only inconsistency is the skin color. That is it. That is it. That's the only thing that's inconsistent is the skin color. So again, back to their premise. He loves the Lord. He loves your daughter. He wants to honor her. He wants to marry her, this, that, and the third. He's, Christian nationalist, hates Israel, hates the Jews, this, that, and whatever. That's their premise, not mine. I don't co-sign all of that. But it's just like, dude, okay? It's not a matter of whether or not he qualifies internally, is whether he qualifies externally. But you're not honest enough with yourself to simply say, it's a matter of my preference of my eye. I have to see him, and I have to see myself in him. It's like, brother, you're dealing with a spirit of prejudice. You're dealing with a spirit of racism. You're dealing with a spirit, brother. My prayer is for him, man, that the Lord would open his eyes. Because back and this was to Ruslan's point, he literally showed videos of Joel with the opposite position that he's currently in right now. 2022, he was talking about the same stuff that, like, literally, he and I would probably be sitting in the same room, shaking hands and shaking our heads like, yeah, bro, racism is wrong, prejudice, all that stuff is wrong. And then all of a sudden, sometime in the last year, the enemy deceived him to thinking that, the white man's going extinct and Christian nationalism is the way to go and all this other stuff. It's just a mess. So, it's not a matter of whether he qualifies internally, it's whether they qualify externally.
A young white.
No.
Man.
A young white.
You're creating a false binary. I'm saying...
He's saying in a vacuum, there's only one.
A black man goes to your church, loves Jesus, Vodi Bakum said...
In a vacuum...
Yes.
That black man is the only suitor that there is? Then I would want my daughter to get married.
Okay, so
I would prefer marriage to my daughter being alone.
Okay. Age is a huge factor as I think about it for my children as well. If you're a 40-year-old man, you came to Christ just a couple years ago, and to be honest, there's not a lot of gals lining up, and you say, hey, here's this gal. We're not closely related, but she's a Christian. She's lovely. She wants to marry me and have a family. That is very much so different than, say, a man who's 22, who's upwardly socially mobile, saying, I'm interested in this for these reasons.
Sure.
So age as well also comes in.
I don't want to get in the weeds of age.
I think it's important to say just at the outset, as we think about even the premise of the debate, is we use this word ordinarily, and it's an important word because we actually, there's two levels of analysis. There's the universal, and you could say a principle or something that's normative. It happens generally speaking. And then you can get into the particulars, right? Look at individual context. And what I think it's more helpful to stay at the frame of the universal or the principle, because what we'll do if we just keep pulling up examples of like, what if there was this and this, and then it becomes
I get you.
this default.
Totally, I understand. There's also a lot in that word generally. You guys are sneaking in a lot in that word generally. That's why I asked you.
But I put it there intentionally.
I understand
not
you put
to
it
be
there
sneaky,
intentionally.
but just to say there are general principles.
Yes, fair enough.
General principles are not necessarily universal principles.
Real
each
quick,
and every
I think you have something, but just a point of clarity. I think we're using our words a little different. Okay, so when you say ethnicity, I think ancestry, like 23andMe DNA. So when you're saying ethnicity, are you using it more like nationality, like American ethnicity is American, like a black man who loves Jesus is an American ethnicity? Is that how you're using it?
Biblically, I would say, natio, that would actually be more in line with what we think of as race.
Okay.
When I say ethnicity, I'm using like Stephen Wolf's definition of ethnicity. So I would argue that I want America as a Christian nationalist to be mono-ethnic. This is what I mean by that. I want everyone in America. That doesn't mean mono-racial. Although I would like America to be predominantly white. I would. Because that's the history. That's the heritage.
Sounds boring.
It's currently...
Those are our people.
There are people.
The pioneers who came and they spread out. They endured the hardship. They created the most prosperous nation the world has ever seen.
Yeah.
Like, those are my people. And to say, and then the future looks nothing like them. It has no continuity,
Is
no
Uganda
resemblance.
I wouldn't say that.
Is the Sudan boring?
I'm not going against this.
Is Japan boring?
No, I'm just saying I'm not going against this idea of or the great work that a particular people has done or put in, right? But you're saying that you would want the America to be
Majority white.
white.
Majority white,
You
yeah.
would want them to be majority white if you had, and this was what was interesting. If you had a black person who met your criteria standard wise and character wise and spiritually, that you would discourage your daughter from marrying this individual.
If we're not in a vacuum, if we're not in isolation, then ordinarily for every black man who would fit my criteria currently, right now, let's just be honest, for every black man who would meet my theological criteria, heritage criteria, all those kind of things, moral criteria, behavioral criteria, he's upstanding, for every black man like that, there would be at least 20 white men.
So, but why would you discourage?
Those stats actually stink when I really think about it. Because the reality is, in my opinion, would be that if you really want to be really realistic, if he's saying for every 20 white man, right, there's that one black man that also fits in. I would actually argue that is less as it pertains to white people. Like I don't think it would be as much as he thinks, dude. I've been in the church for a while, dude. I've been in mixed churches, and I've known people who, outside my own personal churches, that I'm just like, bro, like, you are the wildest white boy I've ever met. And you talk about you love God, and you doing this, that, the third, and it's just like, no, dude, I don't think the stats are really there like how he thinks he is. And I think I think the problem is this, and again, it's preference, same thing, but also bias. Right? I think he believes in the goodness of white people a little too much. What do I mean by that? I mean, naturally, we're all kind of biased. So, to that point, I say this. We're all naturally kind of biased to the idea that we are people, whoever it is that we kind of co-sign with, are naturally, like, good. In the sense of like, sorry, give me 1 second. I was like, it's doing a little too much. In the sense of that, like, we believe in the goodness of anybody that looks just like us. And that's not a realistic POV when you really think about it, right? Because you're talking about the fact that, like, you think that for every 20 white people that are good, apparently, according to his standard, he would consider that good, right? Qualify for marrying his daughter. There's one black guy who is just good enough, and if not really just meaning better than the rest of the average black male criteria. Yeah, those stats really are biased. You're pulling stats that don't really necessarily make sense because they're based upon a bias that white people are good and black people are generally bad. I can't give you the benefit of the doubt, unfortunately. It's like I want to so bad, like, I really want to help this guy out, but like you can't, right? You're being racist. You have racist perspective now. All of a sudden, again, remember I said like back in 2022 he wasn't like this. I believe he was still on like the white Christian nationalist, wave, but other than that, it was never like I want to see a predominantly white America. And then to their point, talking about, those were the guys that, built America. And it's like, dude, like, I understand what you're saying. But again, like I said earlier, if that was the case, who knows? All I can say is this, they need help. He needs to really see the light on this. And God willing that, God Logic and Ruslan can help him.
Against the black one who meets your
because
standard.
If both options are viable, there are 20 white men who fit the bill and one black man who fits the bill, then all things being equal, I would prefer for my grandchildren to look like me.
And there you have it. I mean, the jokes write themselves, right? It's just a preference for him, dude. He would prefer that down the line, his descendants would look like him. They would look, wait, brother, that's not good. That's not even Christ-like by any means. When the word talks about who not to be with, it's talking about, and we'll go Old Testament, New Testament. Okay. When the word talks about who not to mix with and who to mix with, it's not talking about race. It's talking about a spiritual status, right? In the sense of, let's take it to, I think it was like Leviticus. Basically, like, what does Leviticus talk about? Because Leviticus kind of lays it out for the children of Israel, like, hey, all these nations are around you, right? So naturally, when you see someone that's different than you, that piques your interest. You're like, oh, wow, she or he, they look really this. I love their skin tone, this, that, and the third, And so it's like, it's not talking about you can't mix with races. It's these guys were being given over to idols, and God, protecting his children, did not want them to be given over to idols as well. So therefore, he says, look, do not give your sons, do not give your daughters over to these other nations who worship these other idols, right? Here, 1 second. Idol worship. Marrying. Because what you find is that these God wasn't looking for first of all, I think about it this way too. It's like, if God didn't honor interracial marriage, I really don't feel that God would have put a child in a woman's womb if he was like, oh, this is disgusting, this is not, like that. I feel like that just goes against God's whole, his whole order. Let's go. Marriage outside of Israel. Generally discourage Israelites from marrying. So here we go. So here we go. Right, so Leviticus and other Old Testament books generally discourage Israelites from marrying foreigners, Canaanites, idolaters, because it led them to worship other gods, a matter of faith, not race, with exceptions like Rahab and Ruth, who converted. The command was to avoid pagan practices and maintain, and this was like Leviticus 21 and 14, faithfulness with specific prohibitions for priests, and general commands against marrying those who would turn Israel away from God. So this whole thing has nothing to do with the fact that, it's a mixing of race and this, that, and the third. It has everything to do with the fact that, here we go, defile woman or harlot, these he shall not marry, but he shall take a virgin of his own people as a wife. Yeah. So Moses is kind of laying it out. That's weird. But anyhow. So yeah, that's kind of where I just wanted to add that in there, because it's like, what he's saying isn't biblical. And so for him to call himself, for him to be a pastor is extremely concerning to me. Right? Because at that point, you're not even preaching a Christian nationalist perspective, but rather a white nationalist doctrine, right? That says that, we'll let black people into the church, but just know that we're better than you. And that's not godly. Come on.
Okay.
And this
so
is
it's a
actually-
preference. It's a preference.
Let me just chime in. We further deny that sovereign nations must only be composed of mono-ethnic populations. Therefore, as Christian nationalists, we utterly repudiate sinful ethnic partiality in all its forms. So you signed this statement denying a country being a mono-ethnic
Must
population.
be.
Okay.
Must be.
But you signed this Christian nationalist statement. This sounds like a clear contradiction, which you just said, which you would prefer to be mono-ethnic.
Prefer must. Yeah. Those
Okay.
are two different words.
Okay. So that you don't think that's a bit of a contradiction in a statement you've signed here?
No, I don't. We want America to be mono-ethnic. Again, that does not mean monoracial or monocolor. So when I say mono-ethnic, I'm thinking of someone like Clarence Thomas, who is a Christian American man. He's a Christian American man. I don't want people who are from Haiti and got here 2 weeks ago. But if America was not monoracial, right? There are some black people, there's Hispanic people, there's some Asian people, and majority white people, but they're all Christian. They all speak English. I don't walk into stores and see 7 different languages
Yes. Yeah, I
anymore.
understand your position.
That's what
as
I
a
mean by
Christian.
mono-ethnic.
Okay, so you would prefer it, but it must not be.
I wouldn't say it has to be in
Okay.
order for it to be a Christian nation.
Okay. You don't think that's incongruent and incoherent?
No.
Okay.
Nah.
You have, when you get to the empire status, I think of Russia, for example, you're going to be the composition of a number of different people from different geographies. And your challenge is have enough of a shared identity, but you also don't want it to destroy the distinctives. And so America's pretty big. It's a lot different than a nation like Georgia, for example. Georgia will probably be mostly monoracial and monoethnic. America, if people could identify as America, that would be great. But we do recognize you have parts of, like I said, the heritage blacks in the South, the Hispanics mostly in Texas and California. You're going to have some differences in there, and you don't have to, as a Christian nation, come in and say, and now all these distinctions have to be flattened. There will be no more soccer. You can say, no, we recognize 350 million people. There's going to be little Italy, and there's going to be little Chinatown. And you don't have to say those things can't exist.
I would like to get rid of soccer.
They call it football. Everywhere else.
Soccer is a deceitful tactic to get people to just run long distances for no reason. Go ahead.
I want to ask you the same question. So, like, because you are a more unique, side of this team.
Yeah.
So when it comes to how you're viewing this, what would you? I don't know what to present to you. What's because you're interracial. You're black and white.
Yeah.
So how would you handle a black or white person trying to come and, let's say you had a daughter or vice versa, a son, and they're trying to come into your family?
Yeah, it's a good question. And one actually it's really important for the purpose of this conversation because people like me are the product of kind of what we're going back and forth over. And it presents a bunch of quandaries, I think, being biracial, being mixed race, whatever you want to call it. I would say I would get back to the sort of the core theme of the position. It's this idea, and we, in my opening statement, I rooted it in creational order, but it's this idea that marriage is founded on this idea of compatibility, or a more specific word could be correspondence. So I have 3 children. My children are I'm married to a white woman. My children are 75% white. I believe a shared identity, a component of your identity is your race. I think you would probably admit that as well, right? Like when you talk to people and you say, "Yeah, I'm black," and that blackness carries some significance. It carries some meaning when you say it, So having race as a component of shared identity, I have children who are 75% white. They certainly, if you saw them, you would believe they presented as white. You'd be hard pressed to think they were set 25% black, for example. I would encourage my children to find a spouse that is compatible with them. That is not only culturally, and we think about ethnos, and I think my definition of ethnos encapsulates basically language, culture, exactly what sort of Joel is describing. But not only that, I think the shared identity as well is a part of that. And I think in the same way that black people can have a sort of a blackness, a black element to their identity, white people should have a black element, a white element to their identity.
There's some whites that got a black element to their
yeah, that's definitely true. So my position would be to encourage my child to marry a white woman on the basis of that.
Really?
Yeah.
Even because it sounds like they have both. No?
Well,
His kids look very white for the record.
His kids are, they're
2 of my children have blue eyes.
they're very white. They're very white. I'll just say that.
They're very
the
white.
phenotype is white. And their mother is white. Their father is half white. You can do the math on that. They're 75.
I have a question for you, right?
Sure.
So I want to ask you this question because I've being mixed race, I've spent my time around within the black community and black culture, and I'm pretty familiar with it in that sense. Do you believe that, I guess, the black American culture is distinct from the white American culture?
In a way, yeah.
Would you say, would it be safe to say that predominantly the average black person you meet on the street is you're going to be able to pick up in their sort of how they articulate, how they talk, or using our hands, where that person comes from a distinct culture from, say, like suburban, Westchester, Connecticut, or something like that.
100%.
Right. And so I think there's an element of that in the way of like race actually serves as a proxy. Like we can talk about all these examples. Like here's all the elements of compatibility: tradition, custom, where you grew up, which is important for compatibility and certainly an element. And then you have race. And the idea that you like solve for all of these, all things being equal in the Vodi Bakum situation, but like race is the only distinctive. And I would just say experientially is a very, very rare thing. Like I've rarely met a black person who was like, who had like no sort of ties, if you will, to a distinct culture from white culture.
He's wearing turtlenecks.
Right. I mean, they exist.
I wear turtlenecks.
There you go.
I would just ask, like, man, are you guys, this is like a Texas thing? Because I think you go to other parts of the country and you'll discover that there's a way more cultural overlap. Meaning, if you come to Oceanside Vista, California, you're going to have way more in common with a person that went to the same high school group in the same community, listens to the same music, comes from a similar family, comes from the same surf.
That would be
culture.
what you're describing as like a micro ethnicity, even more particular. And you're right.
Yes.
Like, so if people have both grown up, not just in the same nation, but they've both grown up in the same county, or
they're going to have way more in common. And I only use that as a proxy.
Overlap can be extreme, like a lot of that.
But do you see my point though? I'm saying that those two people are going to have substantially more in common if they're from the same region than marrying a white woman from Nebraska.
Well, sure. So if we zoom into, what'd you say, Oceanside, for example, and then you have like
I remember Oceanside.
I've never been there, so forgive me.
You should come visit.
Well, maybe I might.
It's nice.
But anyway, so
it was nice. It's not as
still
nice.
doing the Lord's work.
All right.
Yeah. So I say that because I think the disconnect is very broad definitions of the word race. When you meet a lot of people and travel a lot and experience a lot, you'll start discovering that, man, Ethiopian second generation evangelicals are very different than descendants of slaves in America.
Yeah,
you'll discover that Ghanaian people are very different than Ethiopian people. Yeah. You'll discover I'm Armenian. My mother's adopted by an Armenian family, but she's Russian. You'll discover there's a lot of difference between Armenians and Russians. You'll discover there's a lot of difference between Armenians and Armenians living in Azerbaijan. And then there's a lot of difference between Armenians from there versus Armenians in Glendale. I have nothing in common with an Armenian woman that grew up in Glendale. We have virtually zero in common culturally, even though we might both be Christian, right? So I think what I'm saying is we're using these really broad definitions for race, which, like, you guys familiar when the word race even made it into the English language, approximately?
16th century.
Yeah, 16th century. That's relatively modern, right? So if we're going to rail against the leftists and the liberals for their definitions of gender and and all this nonsense that we're seeing from the left, this is a relatively modern innovation for this broad cast of, hey, there's blacks and there's whites and there's Asians and then maybe a couple of others, but we don't know. Again, it falls apart because it's way more based on ethnicity. This is why we see tribes warring in parts of Africa. This is why you tell a Persian they're Arab, and they're going to be very upset at you. You tell an Arab they're Persian or a Turk, they're going to be very upset at you. So I think the distinctions is way more cultural and nuanced than just these very broad categories. Quick.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the biggest thing about race, the word race, it's a separator. That's the biggest problem with that word that I have, is that it is a separator. It absolutely segregates humanity into categories, and then it tells humanity to dwell within these categories and to create an identity for yourselves within that category. And then it tells you that if anyone comes against your category and says that your category is, a bunch of bums or this, that, and the third, or your category is racist, then you need to stand up against them. You need to fight them. You need to do all this, that, and the third. It's a divider. That's all race. That's why I'm glad he said that, because, yeah, it's a relatively new concept. I know we're in the 20th century, but 16th century wasn't technically all that long ago. You're talking about the moment that people of different ethnicities saw someone else of a different ethnicity, they said, let's overpower them and take them as our own. And then that's what they did. And then that's where the whole treatment thing became a thing of how to treat black people. Charles Darwin really coined the whole idea of black people are only 3/4 of a human, which obviously would make a lot of white people feel in that day a lot better about how they treated black people or really anybody of a different ethnicity, right? But overall, it's a divider, right? Like, it was never God's design that, you know, we should be separate from one another. We should even consider ourselves separate from one another. It shouldn't be that black people should be uncomfortable in a room full of white people, and a white person shouldn't be uncomfortable in a room full of black people. It shouldn't be that way. But because society has done such a good job at separating us and segregating us, right? And telling us to be separate and telling us that we shouldn't be together, that it's created a problem. It's created this whole dilemma now to where when we do try to get together or when we do successfully get together and we do mix, it causes more division. And it's just like, dude, when your identity is rooted in your earthly heritage, into your earthly ethnicity, right? It messes everything up. It messes up the quality of your relationships with the people that you're around, messes up the quality of the relationship with your coworkers, with your in-laws, right? It messes up the quality of your life living amongst other human beings, right? There's only one race, and that is the human race. Okay? The moment that we start sitting here and saying black race, white race, Asian race, Mexican race, and anything in between, that's where we start messing up. That's where really has been the biggest issue with America, but also worldwide. That has been the biggest issue to date, is that we separated ourselves and we allowed society to separate us. But then when someone decides, hey, you know what, I'm going to go across the fence, all of a sudden it's, oh, you're a traitor to your race. You're a traitor to your people. And it's just like, no, I'm not betraying anybody. I have literally not betrayed anybody. I have not. Like, what? You know? And it's like, you know, I know a lot of people get on like basketball players in the NBA who, you know, once they get out of the hood, they start dating white women and marrying white women. It's just because it's something that's not familiar to them. That's the whole thing. It's just like if you grew up around a lot of black people, naturally you're attracted to something that does not look like you. But personally, I don't care. I personally don't give a crap. I mean, do I believe that people absolutely date people for the sake of a fetish? Absolutely. The porn industry did a great job on that end. Okay? Making people fetishize one another based upon race, right? You know, if you're black and you've never had a white girl, well, you should be fantasizing about having a white girl. This, that, and the third. And I know I'm kind of going off on a bluster here. But this is what happens. Like, this is literally like what we're living in right now currently is the cause of societal separation, which was coined by hateful, spiteful people who call themselves Christian, like Joel. I'm just saying.
Categories. You guys understand what I'm saying?
Yes. Part of the reason I would say that race has, at least the word, the concept I think is old, but at least the word has come into, you know, more regular use in language in recent times is partly because of the radical changes that we've made in the world. Like back in the day when you say this person is of this nation, it tended to mean that he's of of the same biological characteristics, cultural characteristics. But now, like, because we have, people have moved and we have tons of people over here and tons of people over there and all the, now, it's, if somebody says, well, I'm American, then the natural question is like, well, what kind of American are you? What kind of an American? If I can't see them and I can't detect like an accent in their voice, and I just, they're just saying, I'm an American, and I can't see them, I wouldn't really have a clue.
Right. So do you see how it's arbitrary then? Saying I'm an American is no different than someone saying I'm white. What does that even mean? Which white? Irish, Scottish, Italian? There was hierarchies within white folks when they came over, okay? So what does that even mean? Are Armenians white? I don't know. It depends on who you ask, right? So are Armenians, like, these categories are way more divided when you travel outside of the United States and you start discovering that people are actually Japanese folks don't want to marry Chinese folks, and it has nothing to do with race, zero to do with race.
Well, no, it is, because they're distinct people occupying two different spaces.
But that's not
that have
race.
developed.
That's not race.
No,
That's
they're
ethnicity and
biologically-
nationality.
They're biologically different from one another.
Okay.
Whether it be in bone structure.
Yes, but there's white folks that are biologically different. If you go northern, the white folks there love milk. You go south, Europe, the white folks are lactose intolerant. There's all sorts of disparities within races.
Sure, but
But you understand that point. The genetic disparities within races, oftentimes there's more disparities between white people, right, than there are between a
the
black and a white
intra-group
person.
versus between the groups in general.
Yes, so like I come from Armenia, right? I'm from the Caucasus Mountains. I am an Armenian from the Caucasus Mountains.
Right.
I'm Caucasian. Yeah?
Yeah.
So I'm an original Caucasian. You guys are all frauds as far as I'm concerned, right? But you talk to some people, and Armenians aren't viewed as white, depending on who you're talking to. Sure. That's the confusing part about all this stuff. And again, if God is a God of order, if God is a God of this is not making stuff confusing, we're now getting into creating restrictions that Scripture does not clearly lay out. And we can get back into the Scripture.
I'm glad you're emphasizing the distinctizing and the lack of confusion, because my position, as I laid it out, interracial marriage, if it was normative, let's say 50, 60%, it would destroy those distinctions in a matter of generations. If you brought the people, you said Armenia, I know there's Georgia, kind of to the north of Iran. If you took all of those people and they said, you know what, we're going to do it. It's going to be normative. It's going to be ordinary. If they went ahead and did that, much of the distinctions, all of those distinctions that you're talking about would actually be flattened. You would just kind of then have this group of Eastern Europeans that they didn't really have a identity or something shared from the past. Your parents would go back to the homeland and say, this doesn't look like anything I recognize.
But this already doesn't look like anything we recognize, because we were ethnically cleansed from Azerbaijan because we were Armenian.
Exactly.
Right?
Ethnically cleansing,
not
let me just
great.
say,
Not
is
great.
a terrible thing that people's undergo.
So you're saying there's ethnic cleansing happening through interbreeding?
Yes, through third world
Yes.
migration into Europe,
Yes.
the rape of white women all across Northern Europe.
Yes.
You are having, it's traumatic. It's psychological terror for white
and it
girls
shouldn't be laughed at.
to think that they're going to be raped on the way to school. Like, we all agree, I'm not going to paint you guys badly. You all would agree that that's bad. And we recognize it's especially bad because these people that have nothing in common are coming in, they're from a different religion, perpetuating terror on the native populace.
But again, you're conflating what we're saying, and you can jump in. I don't want to keep going. You're conflating that you think we're arguing for mass migration.
I never said you
or whatever.
I know you're not.
You're pointing to these fringe examples that are awful. What's happening in Europe is terrible.
Right.
What's happening with the Muslims coming over there that do not assimilate to the culture is not good. That is not what we're talking about. That is not the conversation that's being had. We are talking about making hard lines where the Scripture doesn't have any, based on arbitrary standards that we don't see played out in any sort of society throughout history up until 500 years ago.
I want to go
the
to
issue.
Avery, but I would just say what I'm arguing, I know you're not for mass migration, but to say interracial marriage should be normative would have the same effect long term as short term.
I didn't say it should be normative.
Or
You're making the case that you're against it. I
Yes,
said
so I'm
I
against it being
understand-
normative because that would be the
So
result.
what I'm saying is people can have preferences. You want your kids to look white. You want your kids to you're going to have a bunch of Mariah Careys. I'm not mad at you. Okay, if you want that, Joe, you want your daughter. No one's mad at preference. There's a lot of black folks that want their kids to be black. No one's mad at preference.
And we
The
haven't said you're
issue-
mad at us for preference.
Yeah. No.
I'm mad at you for preference.
Yeah.
Dang it.
The issue is when we take preference and we make it prescription. That's the fundamental flaw in your argument.
I love that. Right. When we make preference prescription, that is a very much a fundamental flaw. Because then it's basically becoming like this is the law of the land rather than this is just arbitrary. This is just, whatever, no big deal. Do it, don't do it. non-salvation issue. Really, I'm gonna wrap it up with this, and I highly recommend. I'm gonna link this whole debate in the description below for you guys to watch the whole thing because it's really good. But it comes with the question, right? You know, of basically like, you know, what is right, what is wrong, what is God saying, what is God not saying? Is this right? Is this okay? Can I do this? Can I listen? Read your word, right? And believe the word, right? Don't sit here and try to come up with your own gospel, basically, right? Where it says, hey, you know what? Mixed racing is wrong, and I'm pretty sure the Bible confirms everything I'm saying. Keep in mind, these guys have not brought up the Joel and his crew have not brought up a single scripture that can really back anything that they're saying. Except in his like opening statement, he did. But like even still, it's like when you go back and you read them, you're like, bro, these don't do anything for your argument except tear it down. So, with that being what it was, I was like kind of thrown off with, you know, the whole thing. And let me say this too, you know, Joel doesn't seem like a bad dude. He just seems like a misled guy, right? You know, again, I don't sit here and I don't get all freaking huffy and puffy like most black pastor, preacher, whoever the heck. You know, because at the end of the day, my identity isn't found in my race, dude. I'm not really like, you know, I'm open-minded enough at this point to be like, look, let me just hear this dude, because he might just be misguided. And he is. He's absolutely 110% just misguided. Again, like I said, Ruslan brought up, you know, stuff that he was saying back in 2022. Like I said, if it was me and him in a room, we would have been shaking hands and absolutely, you know, 100% agreement about a lot of the stuff. But because of however he got deceived, I believe it mainly comes from just like, you know, well, to their point, right? They're afraid of, you know, basically the white man being wiped out of history. You know, it's like, dude, white people ain't going anywhere. Like I said earlier, dude, like white people, you're not going anywhere. I promise you. You know, and even then, you know, like what's the harm in mixed race people, you know? Like I knew a lot of mixed people growing up, and they had such a hard time like adapting with society. So that might be a problem. That can be a struggle. But even then, I say it's like, why is your identity so solidified in what you see when it should be solidified in who you're trying to be more like, which would be Christ, okay? If your identity is not rooted in Christ, you will be ripping and you will be running all over this place trying to figure out who you are, who am I supposed to be, where am I supposed to be, what am I supposed to be doing, am I black, am I white, am I Hispanic, am I Asian, because you're all mixed into whatever. It's like, dude, you're creating for yourself a different kind of problem that's not even a necessary problem, right? In fact, this fight in and of itself is so irrelevant to God. It is so irrelevant to God's like, bro, what? I got bigger issues than whether or not white people are going to exist in the next 20 to 40 years. I got way bigger issues. I remember hearing that on the radio back in like 2012, I think, about basically how the population of white people has decreased over the last like century or so, you know. But it's because it's like, again, like I said earlier, when you see something that you're not necessarily familiar with, or rather when you see someone who does not look like you, it piques your interest in a greater way. So therefore you're like, I want that. I want to be next to that. I want to be with that, whatever, you know. But there's nothing wrong with that, you know, so long as you're doing it for the right reasons. That's my biggest thing. That's why I mentioned earlier about how the porn industry has fetishized race, right? And interracial sex mainly, not even so marriage. It's just interracial sex. If you're black, you should get with a white person. If you're white, you should get with a black person. If you're Asian, you should get with a black person, and so on and so forth, right? And so like those are problems that I would probably bring up here and say like, yo, hey, this is an issue. That's a problem, you know. But other than that, the rest of the stuff, it's not even nearly as big a deal as possible. And I'll finish it up with this. I really do believe that what Joel and his crew are, I do believe that there's a part of it that is salvational issue, because what kind of God are you serving that makes you believe that he wouldn't want his people to be fruitful and multiply, despite ethnicity, despite the color of their skin? What kind of God are you serving, right? Now, if this is the same Jesus, right, that tells us to love our neighbor, and that tells me to love my neighbor, then I'm maybe we're following two different Jesuses. I don't know. I don't really know. I don't know yet. You know, it's one of those things that I'm wrestling with. Like, I was wrestling with it the whole time. I'm like, bro, like, I don't know. Is this a salvational issue? Like, is this, you know, because but the problem is this, right? You know what it is? It affects the way in which you love. And that in and of itself is a salvation issue. If you ask me, if it affects the way in which you love on people, because I just brought it up, right? If Jesus tells me to love my neighbor, right? Okay, and my neighbor is white, and I'm not able to love them to the fullest capacity because me and this white person don't share the same ethnic background or values or whatever, then that's a problem with me, not with God. That has everything to do with me, and that's where I'm kind of at with it. It comes down to like Joel and his whole crew, is that like this is gonna prevent you guys from really being able to walk in love with people. Okay, like I don't think there's not a single ministry that I've ever watched where God moved because the pastor loved some but not all. That's Jesus says, whoever is the greatest amongst you, he shall be your slave. So therefore, you have a calling as a pastor to love on as many people as possible. But this is the one thing I say for Joel, is that this is going to prevent you from really being able to operate in what it is that God wants you to, man. And apparently, and I don't really believe in the whole Christian nationalism. I believe in a Christian government, a government that holds Christian values. But as far as like Christian nationalism, where basically everybody is a Christian, I'm like, bro, first of all, then there's gonna be, it's just gonna be too much. I don't even. We'll never get that right until we get to the kingdom. So, either which way, I know this is a longer video than I usually do. There's so much here, though. There's so much to dissect. There's so much to take away. I want to know you guys' thoughts. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. If you haven't already, be sure to like, subscribe, join our Discord where we have Bible studies every Monday at 7:30. We'd love to see you guys there. And yeah, just stay blessed. Love you guys. Peace out.